What they'll do is, if you look at the picture here, they will have different layers of ash that they will assign dates to. These are from volcanic eruptions, lava flows, or ash layers. If you find a fossil between two layers, you can guess how old it was based upon the potassium-argon date of the one above and the date of the one below. Sounds good, doesn't work. They bracket the sample by the, it's called an event horizon is the term they use for it. They'll say, well, there's a volcanic eruption and made this layer of ash over the whole countryside. Any fossils found below that layer have to be older. Any fossils found above this layer have to be younger. Sounds good. And until Richard Leakey found a skull called the KNMER for, they give them numbers, KNMER 1470. This skull was found under the KBS tuff. Now here everybody had been saying the KBS tuff was over 200 million years old, and they find a normal human skull under it. Ooh, now you got a problem. So they redated the ash layers, the KBS tuff. They would never have redated it if it hadn't found that skull. They redated the ash layers and took 10 samples and got numbers from 0.5 million to 2.64 million. Well, first I'd like to point out that's way down from 212, and still that's a 500% error. It doesn't work. I mean, a 500% error, they'd laugh at you if you put this in a court of law. It's interesting to look at the inflation of the age of the Earth. Back in 1770, George Buffon said the Earth is 70,000 years old. In 1905, the textbooks would say the Earth is 2 billion years old. In 1969, when they went to the moon, they said the moon and the Earth are 3.5 billion years old, and this number was arrived at by potassium-argon dating, like this article says here. Today, the students are taught it's 4.6 billion years old. It's interesting. Do you know the Earth is getting older at the rate of 21 million years per year? That's 40 years per minute. We're aging rapidly, folks, so it's silly. Here's the things to consider about potassium-argon, or any dating method for that matter. Number one, wild dates are frequently obtained. They're not always consistent. They get all kinds of numbers. They pick the ones that they want based on the preconceived idea, which is based on the geologic column, which is dumb. Secondly, dates that don't fit the theory are routinely rejected. That's not how science ought to work. I mean, if it works, it ought to work every time. It ought to be testable or demonstrable. Number three, it's obvious any dating method is based on the assumptions that the original content can be known, that the decay rate never changes, that the sample's never been contaminated. And the fourth observation somebody needs to point out to these guys is all of these decay rates are based on a decline, downhill slide, not uphill. Potassium decays to argon. Carbon-14 decays. Everything is decaying. This is the opposite of evolution. They need something that's improving. This will go back to the concept we talk about on Seminar Part 4 of the 6 different meanings of the word evolution. You have to have chemical evolution where the chemicals go higher on the periodic table, not lower. All of these are examples of them going lower. Mount St. Helens erupted. Many volcanoes erupt. For instance, Mount Etna erupted in Sicily back in 122 BC. It was a dated eruption. They had historical evidence for it. When the potassium-argon dated it, it was 250,000 years old. The 1801 Hawaiian lava flow gave a potassium-argon age of 1.6 million. It didn't work. Another Hawaiian lava flow from 1959 gave an age of 8.5 million years old. Mount Etna from Sicily erupted again in 1964, dated, and everybody watched it happen. And yet when they dated it with potassium-argon dating, it was 700,000 years old. In 1972, it erupted again, and now the dates came 350,000 years old. The lava from Mount St. Helens was tested right after it erupted in 1980. Brand new lava dome. They knew the age of it, and yet it gave numbers from different dating methods ranging from 350,000 to 2.8 million. This is coming from the same rocks from the lava flow that they knew is 20 years old. So, again, when you date a sample of known age, it doesn't work. When you date a sample of unknown age, it is assumed to work. That's not common sense. And again, wild dates are picked. They find them all the time. They pick the numbers they want. They reject anything they don't like. It's based on many assumptions, just like any other dating method is. Okay. Get the book, The Evolution Cruncher, if you want a whole lot more on the other dating methods about uranium-235, uranium-238. There's much information there, or on the website icr.org, which is Institute for Creation Research. Next question. Have fresh dinosaur bones been found? Absolutely yes, quite a few actually. Some frozen dinosaur bones were found in the book here, The Great Alaskan Dinosaur Adventure from Master Books in Arkansas. You can read about going up and finding frozen dinosaur bones. In 1993, the Journal of Science, December 24th, Christmas Eve, they reported an amazing preservation of the bones of a young duck-billed dinosaur found in Montana. Under the microscope, the fine structure of the bones was seen to have been preserved to such an extent that the cell characteristics could be compared with cells of chicken bone. 1961, in northwest Alaska, they found a bed of dinosaur bones that were unpermineralized. That means not fossilized. That is from Journal of Paleontology, 1986-87. In Omni magazine, January of 1990, they talk about on the banks of the river in Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, frozen dinosaur bones were found that are as light as balsa wood and look as fresh as yesterday's dog bones. The structure was porous and the fossils were not mineralized. On Bylot Island, 1987, they found the lower jaw of a duck-billed dinosaur that was in fresh condition. Joe Taylor, who does a lot of digging for dinosaurs in Texas, in Crosbyton, Texas, outside of Lubbock, has discovered many times, he said he finds dinosaur bones that are not fossilized. So the idea that dinosaurs lived millions of years ago is silly. So, next question. If there really was a flood, where are all the human bones? People say, oh, if the world was totally destroyed, you ought to find millions of human fossils. Well, about 4,000 human remains have been found, according to Marvin Lubenow, who's one of the smartest guys I know on the topic of human ancestors. You know, his book Bones of Contention is excellent from the Christian perspective on all the so-called cavemen that they're finding. Many of the human remains, even those are very fragmentary, just one bone or just a few bones, but let's assume 4,000 human remains have been found, just to pick a number. I think when God made the earth 6,000 years ago, it was full of plants, full of animals, and only 2 people. 4,400 years later, when the flood, or 1,600 years later when the flood came, the world is still full of plants and still full of animals and still not full of people. I'm not sure what the population was. I would pick a number clear out of the clear blue sky and say, let's assume there was 1 billion people at the time of the flood. May have been a lot more. If they had 100 kids per family, populations grow quickly like that. But let's say that it was a population of 1 billion. It may have been 10 billion. I don't think there's any way to tell. Okay. Problem is, they all died except for Noah and his family. So, 1,600 years and 1,650 years after the creation, you still don't have the world full of people yet. The purpose of the flood was to destroy man off the earth, Genesis chapter 6 and verse 7. The Bible also says there were giants in the earth in those days, men of renown, mighty men, big people. Here's a picture we use on seminar part 2 about the human thumb bone on top compared with a giant human thumb bone underneath, found right near Mount Ararat. Here's the reasons I would give why so few human fossils have been found. Number one, there were less animals to be killed, less people to be killed than there were animals. Okay, so you're more likely to find animal bones than human bones, simply because there were more of them. Okay, God only made 2 people, but He made a world full of animals. Secondly, people are smarter than animals. Well, some people anyway. And so they would tend to avoid drowning until last, and they end up on top. So they end up rotting instead of being buried. In order to fossilize, the animal has to be buried. So I think you're more likely to find animal fossils than human fossils for this reason also. Thirdly, if humans were bigger, the bones might not be recognized as human. Because many people go into this study with a preconceived idea that evolution is true and man used to be small and we're getting bigger and better and stronger and smarter, and probably exactly the opposite is true. If people were 8 or 9 or 10 feet tall before the flood, and you found human bones from somebody 8 or 9 or 10 feet tall, like this thigh bone here over my head, which is from a human that would have been nearly 13 feet tall. We cover that on video number 3, or video 2, I guess, about the giant people. That would have been a 13-foot human. Well, if just a fragment of that bone was found, nobody would dream it came from a human, if they believed in evolution, because they've got stuck in their head, man used to be like a chimpanzee, 3 feet tall, and now we're 6 feet tall. And so they would assign it to something else. They would call it a cave bear or a giant sloth or something. Okay, it can't be human. That they would know for sure. So I think many bones are misidentified for that reason, because of the preconceived evolutionary concept, which is a great hindrance to scientific research. Next question. Where did Noah get pitch? In my debate number 7 with an atheist that was a former preacher, a Church of Christ preacher turned atheist, he said Noah couldn't make pitch because pitch is made from oil, and oil formed during the flood. Well, there's a problem with that. Several problems with that. Genesis chapter 6. God said to Noah to make the ark with gopher wood and pitch it with pitch within and without. Obviously, he's going to pitch it before the flood comes, so he's not going to make it out of oil that are made from creatures that drowned in the flood. Exodus 2 talks about Pharaoh's daughter drawing Moses from a basket that was daubed with pitch. They covered it with pitch. Well, what is pitch anyway? Isaiah 34 talks about pitch. It says burning pitch, and it puts off a smoke. Here we learn a few things about pitch. If you get a dictionary from 1828, Webster's Dictionary, 1828, you'll notice you can look up the word pitch. And by the way, 1828 is before oil was used commercially. I think the first oil well was drilled in Pennsylvania about 1830s or 40s maybe. I don't remember the date. But certainly there were no oil wells that we know of before that. So they weren't drilling into the ground to get oil, and yet they were making pitch in 1828. It's in the dictionary. It says, pitch is a thick, tenacious substance, the juice of a species of pine or fir. It's made from pine trees. It's the juice, the sap of a tree. Its second definition says it's the resin of pine or turpentine. It's used in caulking ships and paying the sides and bottom. That's to waterproof the boats. So they were pitch industries. They were whole factories. They produced pitch. They put it in barrels and they would sell it to ship-making companies who would cover their, it's basically like a tar substance, but it's made from the sap of trees. So no, don't tell me the Bible's wrong because it says they used pitch before the flood. The Bible is absolutely correct, and the skeptics are wrong. Okay, next question. Was ancient man primitive? Some people get this false idea that modern man is smart and everybody in the past was dumb. That's ridiculous. There's a lot of indication ancient man was extremely smart. There's an excellent book we sell called The Puzzle of Ancient Man by Don Chittick. Highly recommend this one. It's about 10 bucks, showing some of the incredible achievements of ancient man. Before the flood came, the Bible says the people lived to be over 900 years old. You could learn a lot in 900 years. Plus, when you consider a couple other factors, they lived in a perfect environment. They would have had much higher IQs, much less to do as far as just daily things you have to do just to live. Most of those things are taken care of in the Garden of Eden. Don't need a house. You got perfect weather. So they can devote all their time to study or learning things. Plus, Adam came pre-programmed from the hand of God, probably had an incredibly high IQ, and he got to walk and talk with God for a while till he sinned, maybe 100 years, we don't know. But got to walk and talk with God. The other factor to consider is Adam lived long enough to know his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson. Noah's daddy could have known Adam for 56 years. So you get not only a much higher starting point, they already knew a lot because God pre-programmed it into Adam. Plus they lived a long time and could learn a lot more. Plus they lived long enough to pass this on to many generations. Today an awful lot of knowledge goes to the grave. You know, about the time you know it all, you die. Or by the time you know a bunch of stuff, you die. Imagine if guys like Einstein could live, 800 or 900 years. How much knowledge could they accumulate in a brain like that? So, I think before the flood, they were much smarter than we are today. And some of this knowledge was passed down, and as lifespans got shorter, it began to be lost. And a lot of societies were arranged to try to, secret societies to preserve this knowledge, through different cultures and things like that. But they opened up a grave in South America. The grave was probably made about 1,000 years ago, and found this little gold artifact in there. You can see it next to the dime for scale. Looks like an airplane about this big. The Smithsonian has it, and they have it labeled as a stylized insect. Because they got this preconceived idea, ancient man was dumb, modern man is smart. They could not possibly have known about airplanes 1,000 years ago. And yet, here they've got one. That's not a stylized insect. I'm sorry, they knew about flight. An Egyptian tomb was opened that's 2,100 years old, and it also had an airplane in it, a little model glider. How did they know about airplanes over 2,000 years ago? This iron pot found in a lump of coal indicates a high level of technology before coal formed. I believe coal formed in the flood in the days of Noah, so an iron pot is not a problem. The Bible says Tubal-Cain was an artificer in brass and iron. Some of the walls that are found in Peru, of these giant stone walls, have these massive blocks of stone that are cut and they fit together perfectly. One of the stones in one of these walls weighs 20,000 tons. Well, the biggest crane on earth today can only lift 3,000 tons. How on earth were they lifting a stone 20,000 tons? We simply don't know how they did it. Actually, in the book Secret of the Lost Races, the author said, what's truly impossible about the block is that it's the size of a 5-story house and weighs an estimated 20,000 tons. He said, we have no combination of machinery today that could dislodge such a weight, let alone move it any distance. It shows their mastery of a technology that we, as yet, have not attained. Somebody in the past knew something we can't even do today, and I think that's the case with a lot of things. This brass bell type thing was found inside a lump of coal. Mr. Newton Anderson has it sitting on his desk. I've talked to him many times about it. I think you ought to donate it to our museum here, Mr. Anderson. We'd keep it safe for you, I'm sure. But kids could come by and see it here. We'd love to have that. By the way, if you have any artifacts for our museum, we'd love to get anything. We want to influence people for the Lord. So if it's sitting in your closet gathering dust, you can put it on loan or give it to us or we'll buy it off you if we can afford it. So that's the kind of things we have here. We want to get the gospel out. This vase found in solid rock, supposed to be 600,000 years old. Ancient man was 600 million years old. Ancient man was not primitive. They found a sunken ship in the Aegean Sea, which is near Greece in the Mediterranean. And there was encrusted on there what appeared to be an analog computing device. The more they analyze this thing, it's now in the National Science Foundation Museum, I believe, in, I don't remember where that one's at, but I read about it a little bit. This looks like an analog computer. This is 2,100 years ago. This hammer was found in rock supposed to be 400 million years old by a lady in Texas. Battelle Laboratory said it's 96.6% iron, 2.6% chlorine, 0.74% sulfur. No carbon. And yet it is stainless steel. It won't rot. It won't rust. Carl Baugh's got it in his museum down in Glen Rose, Texas. Apparently they knew about electricity a long time ago because this battery was found in Iraq from about 2,000 years ago. The Egyptians must have known about electricity. This hieroglyphic shows what appears to be wires and a generator or something hooked up to these two snakes. Either the snakes are producing the electricity or they're putting electricity into the snakes. I don't know, but they must have known about electricity a long time ago. They certainly knew about tampering with the skull, about brain surgery. Some of the skulls are found with holes that actually healed up. They did brain surgery and the people lived. One of the Ica stones from Peru shows a man doing brain surgery. Only about 25 of these stones in America. We have 3 here in our museum. This is one of the actual Ica stones from Peru showing a man and dinosaur together. Some of the stones show amputations, people's legs being amputated and artificial limbs being attached. They show heart surgery. Here are some of the tools that they use for the surgery, for the brain surgery. Dennis Swift has spent a fortune and a lot of time studying all about the Ica stones. They knew about reshaping the skulls. Here are some strange shaped skulls that they used for whatever reason. They would shape the skulls. Ancient man was not primitive. He knew an awful lot, probably more than we do today in many areas. Here's a stone from Ica, Peru, showing what appears to be heart surgery. They're taking the person's heart out. Now, whether that's the soul leaving and the guy died, or I don't know, but they knew about open heart. Here's one showing an artificial limb, thus amputation. This little thing appears to be designed to be a steam engine. Dennis Swift has a lot of information about that. They knew about the wheel a long time ago. This is from the Ica civilization, several thousand years ago. This little spider in real life is only 1/8 of an inch long, but this is one of the drawings called the Nazca lines. Notice the leg on the right, the bottom right, has one leg that's much longer than the rest. It looks like, oops, they made a mistake. It was just discovered recently that this little tiny spider, which you cannot see without a magnifying glass, during mating season, just for a few seconds, that leg grows longer. It mates off, the sperm and eggs are on the tip of that leg, and then the leg shrinks back in. How could they have known that without magnification? These metallic spheres found in South Africa have parallel lines going around them, obviously man-made, and yet they're in rocks supposed to be pre-Cambrian. The textbook said it's 2.8 billion years old. Well, that's baloney. We'll have a whole bunch about this on our website. You can get it from Michael Cremo's books. And of course, he believes it's 2.8 billion. He's wrong about that, but he's right. It's a man-made artifact. This mortar and pestle were found underneath deposits of rock supposed to be 33 to 55 million years old under Table Mountain in California. These little, what they're called nano artifacts were found, extremely tiny little coils, some down to 1/10,000th of an inch. How did they carve something like that? How did they make something? How could they see something like that? I suspect they had much better vision, down to extremely fine vision, to be able to see real tiny things, or they certainly knew about magnification techniques. These nano artifacts follow what's called the golden mean ratio. We're going to do a whole videotape on the golden mean ratio. That is absolutely amazing. How that the Greeks discovered that the thing that's pleasing to the eye is rectangles that are 1 to 1.61 in ratio. That's what the pentagram is all about. And Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse did a cartoon, or Walt Disney did a cartoon about the golden mean ratio called Mathmagic Land, I think is the name of it. That's amazing, showing how the golden mean ratio is found in all sorts of things. It's found in the chambered nautilus. The way that it grows, the length to width of the chambered nautilus follows the golden mean ratio. If you take one and cut it in half, I've got one here, you can see the chambers inside as it grows. The ram's horn does the same thing. A sunflower does the same thing. Even the scales on a pine cone follow the golden mean ratio. We'll do a whole videotape on that someday. That's amazing. Okay, next topic. What about the Great Pyramid? The Great Pyramid is amazing. It is the largest building by far on the surface of the planet. Nobody knows for sure when it was built. There's a lot of theories about it. It's much larger in volume than the Sears Tower. There are 4 theories about the Great Pyramid. 2 theories say it's built before the flood. 2 theories say it's built after the flood. And then they divide up into 2 theories say it's built by heathen people. It's just a heathen structure. No big deal. Other people think, no, it's a godly structure and it has symbolism in there for Christianity, or for at least for the Lord. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I'll just share you the 4 theories with you. The Great Pyramid is a massive building. It is built in Egypt. It may be a fulfillment of this prophecy in Isaiah chapter 19. It says, in that day there would be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof. And it shall be a sign and a witness for the Lord. Many people have preached on this. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But Egypt, they say, this pyramid is on the border where the kingdom split, and there were 2 kingdoms feuding. So it's at the border of Egypt, but it's also in the midst thereof once the kingdoms got back together. Don't know. Couldn't prove that. The Great Pyramid, here's a schematic drawing of it, showing if you walk in the entrance on the right, where the letter A is, you can take the broad way that leads down to the pit, or you can go to the narrow way, which leads you into the king's chamber. So here you have the symbolism of the broad way and the narrow way. If you go up the narrow way, you end up into a large section called the Grand Gallery, and there are markings along the wall that some people think are actually based on pyramid inches, which actually tells some kind of history of the world. You know, it's got events that correspond to major events in world history. It's the largest building by far. It contains enough stone to build a brick wall 10 feet high completely around Texas. Some of the stones in the Great Pyramid weigh 70 tons. The top is 450 feet high. The capstone was never installed. The entrance goes down the broad way, or you can turn around and change your direction and go up the narrow way to the king's chamber. In the king's chamber, there's an empty tomb. Apparently, the tests have revealed there's never been a person buried in there. Again, it may be Christian symbolism, I don't know. The pyramid probably was originally covered with 144,000 casing stones that fit together so tightly that you couldn't even find the seams in many cases, and you definitely couldn't put a piece of paper between them. The capstone was never found. Revelation 7 tells us there's going to be 144,000 of the children of Israel that are sealed in the book of Revelation. Interesting. 144,000 sealed stones encased the Great Pyramid. So this may be something, Christian symbolism, I don't know. Ephesians talks about the whole body being fitly joined together. Matthew tells about the stone that the builders rejected became the head of the corner. Same thing in Mark chapter 12. The stone which the builders rejected. Luke 20. The stone the builders rejected has become the head of the corner. It could be that the pyramid, if it is a Christian symbol, has the capstone, the chief cornerstone, not installed because God is telling us He's not done doing His work here yet. Don't know. Preacher's good. Maybe true. I wouldn't be dogmatic on it. But the book of Daniel talks about the stone cut out of the mountain without hands. It smote the image on the feet, and it became a great kingdom. Some people think that the New Jerusalem, which is 1,500 by 1,500 by 1,500, is actually a pyramid, because that's the only building that has one cornerstone, as opposed to normal buildings which would have 4 cornerstones. A pyramid would have 1, and if Jesus is the light of the world, He could be the cornerstone that hasn't been installed yet, and He's going to be the ruler of the world coming soon to a city near you. Of course, Satan has abused this and used the Great Pyramid as the symbol on the back of the $1 bill. It's a symbol for the New World Order. Notice on the $1 bill they show the left eye, which is what is often used in Satan worship, and they have a gap between the eye and the pyramid. This is supposed to be symbolic of the idea that Lucifer has not been installed as the world ruler yet. They're hoping, of course, to get Lucifer installed. And in front it says, Norvis Odo Seclorum, New World Order, New Order of the Ages. This is the symbol for the New World Order, has been on our dollar bill since 1935. In front, there are things growing. In the back, it's desert. How that they're going to bring in their New World Order. The 13 lines of stone on the Great Pyramid here apparently represent the 13 degrees of the Masonic Lodge, and that's all ties in. We cover more on that on video number 5. Okay, next question. Was the Earth ever a hot molten mass? Textbooks will say, as the Earth formed, the surface was similar to the Moon. Craters like in the picture and large plains of volcanic basalt may have marked its surface. But unlike the Moon, Earth's surface was hot and there were large pools of bubbling lava. That's what the books are teaching the kids in school. The question is it true? Well, Genesis 1 tells us God moved upon the face of the waters. When God made the earth, it was under water, which means it was not a hot molten mass. Somebody is wrong. So the question is, was the earth hot or was it not hot? Well, let's look at the scientific evidence. Robert Gentry from Knoxville, or Powell, Tennessee, near Knoxville, has done great research on radiopolonium halos. His website is halos.com if you want to get a hold of Robert Gentry. I've been to his house, seen his laboratory. It's amazing, the stuff he did on radiopolonium halos. He discovered in granites all over the world there are little tiny rings. You can't see them without a good microscope, but these rings are sort of like, the best analogy would be if a hand grenade exploded in Jell-O, all the fragments would fly out and be stuck in the Jell-O. If you had a big block of Jell-O, it would make a halo. Well, as polonium decays, it's radioactive. As it decays, it sends off these little particles, and they all go a certain distance. So you end up, just similar to the hand grenade, you end up with a ring of these little particles. If this happens in hot molten rock, it's going to decay, make its little halo, and the halo is going to melt. It's going to disappear. Just like when fireworks go off, it makes a beautiful circle in the sky, and then it doesn't stay there. Of course, it falls down. Well, polonium has a very short half-life, and so if it made its little halo as the polonium decayed and made its little halo in the rock, if the rock was hot, the halo would disappear. If the rock were already cold, it would leave a ring behind. And these rings are found in rock all over the world, and Robert Gentry did a lot of research on this and said, folks, these rocks were never a hot molten mass because this is polonium that is original. It's not a daughter product of something else, and it's leaving a ring behind. This rock was never hot. And as soon as his research, people began to realize his research goes against the Big Bang Theory, he lost his funding, of course. Okay, next question. What about global warming? Is it true the Earth is heating up and we've got to save the environment and, save Mother Earth and kill all the whales, or kill all the babies and save all the whales? Well, there's a good book, several good books about global warming. I think there's a whole lot more to this story than we realize. There's no question man has abused the environment, okay, but I don't think the government's the one to fix it. There's a book called Facts Not Fear. You can get through Derry Brownfield's ministry in Missouri. R12, which is what's used in refrigerants for air conditioners, it sinks. It doesn't rise. Try it. If you can get some R12 and poke a little hole in the can and put a match under it, it'll put the match out as it flows over it. It's not going up. A volcano can produce thousands of times more ozone-destroying material than man has produced in the history of our modern world, okay, since R12 has been used for refrigerants. What's happened now, we've got a different one. I think it's R132 used in air conditioners, and the cost has gone way up. This is part of the plan to bankrupt the world, I think, get everybody in debt to the New World Order folks. So no, it's silly what's happened with air conditioning and environmental scares that are going around. I think the real purpose of the environmental movement is to abolish private property, which is Karl Marx's first plank on the Communist Manifesto. They want you to have to get a permit to cut down a tree on your own property. And that's another long, interesting question about permits. We cover that a lot more on our college class, CSE 104, I believe, of our college classes we offer here through our ministry. Next question. Doesn't the Green River Formation prove the Earth is millions of years old? No, it doesn't. The Green River in northwestern United States has a lot of layers of rock around it. This is called the Green River Formation. If you take two pieces of glass with different colored sand in between, like you can buy at the mall, and you flip it over, it automatically sorts into many different layers. If you only have two densities of sand in there, the black and the white are two different densities, why does it make hundreds of layers? Well, you can take rock from the Green River Formation, which has millions of layers, grind it up to powder, sprinkle it in moving water, and it'll sort into hundreds of layers again. Here you have only two densities, and yet it makes hundreds of layers. So it's not proof these layers are annual deposits or anything else. It's proof there was moving water.